to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today is Norman Jordan, the color commentator for Vanderbilt football. This episode is presented by the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water. The Well is a coffee house with a mission to bring clean water to the world. It has helped over 30 communities across the globe have access to safe water, health, and hope. You can also make an impact by visiting a Well Coffee House today. There are 4 locations in the Nashville area. Those are Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, and Bellevue. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We also thank our co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Our news presented by Sutherland and Belk, a local injury law firm committed to helping those who have been injured in accidents. If you or someone you know has been in a wreck or other accident, reach out to Sutherland and Belk, see what your rights are. You can find their contact info at sbinjurylaw.com. Vanderbilt has released its depth chart for the Purdue game. A couple of things of note. Devin Cochran is now listed as a co-starter at left tackle. He did not play last week. Same thing with Sage Young at left guard. He's in an oar with Bryce Bailey. Sage Young did not play last week. At quarterback, that is no longer an oar. Riley Neal is listed as the sole starter there. And most notably, maybe beyond those things, is at running back Jamari Wakefield, not listed on the depth chart. He was hurt late in the Georgia game. And to that, Derek Mason said on Tuesday that they will be without him for a while. Norman Jordan is with us now. He is the color commentator for Vanderbilt football. He is a former tailback at Vanderbilt on the 1982 Hall of Fame Bowl team. Norman, thank you for joining us. Hope you had a wonderful holiday weekend.
Yeah, Chris, thank you. I got a little caught off guard when you said do the podcast. I thought, we don't do the podcast on Monday. But no, it's Tuesday, lo and behold.
When you work for yourself, you don't know what the days are. I mean, you know Saturday and Sunday, and other than that, they all just run together.
Yeah, I almost feel like a retired person, but it's like, oh, did I go to church today? Okay, so it's not Sunday. Let's work backwards from there.
Right. Well, let's talk about the opener. I think considering the circumstances with the offensive line, yes, the offense was not anything what I think people had hoped, but I just don't know. I've said this all week, and feel free to disagree. I just don't know that you can draw a lot of big conclusions from the Vanderbilt-Georgia game, but did you draw any?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I saw is, and what I just got through telling my good friend John Lastinger, the old Georgia quarterback, is, Georgia's an elite team. They're one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country. I don't know how the year plays out with injuries and all that, but you look at their athletes and go, these guys truly are a great team. So there's no shame in losing to somebody that's that good. You look at it on the field and go, would Kirby trade any of his starters for any of ours? And I'm not sure the answer would be yes.
Yeah, I mean, tight end would probably be one, although Pinckney didn't have a great night, and tailback might be another, but I mean, those two kids are both so good. And I think that kind of says it all. Even the best tailback that Vanderbilt has had ever may not be better than the one that Georgia's got
at this point in time, right? Not to mention go back through the history of Herschel and Rodney Hampton and all these great players they've had down through the years. So, yeah, and I still believe – I thought Keyshawn had a respectable showing. I think he finished with about 75 yards on the night. That's respectable. I mean, Georgia's, like I keep saying, they're an elite team. I think a lot of the problem with the offense, not to jump ahead of where you're going, but a lot of it was we couldn't get anybody open downfield. So you can sit there and let your linebackers key on running backs all night.
Well, I look at it this way, too. Let's say you and I are running a foot race and you're just a second faster in the 100 than I am. We can run that race all day, and I'm just not going to catch you unless you pull up with cramp or something like that. And I kind of look at Vanderbilt, Georgia the same way. Is it just there's a limit on what they were going to be able to do just because Georgia was bigger and faster and stronger, and they're going to play a lot of teams on their schedule where the margin isn't nearly that great, or Vanderbilt's got the edge in some of those areas. Is I just think, again, that's the way that I look at it. I just think when you've got a game that's that much of a talent mismatch, not that Vanderbilt's a bad team, it's just Georgia is what it is. It's just harder to make conclusions. And I think the more fair fights start Saturday. Now, that may go back the other way for the LSU game. I've not seen them play yet. We will wait and see. But point being, there's not going to be many more of those ahead.
No, absolutely. I think they played the best team they'll play all year. They didn't quit. They played the whole time. I thought they made some really good defensive adjustments. If you go back and look at it, there were 3 touchdowns in the first half, and they were pretty much ugly touchdowns in terms of our defense. But then 3 field goals in the second half, and frankly, until the end, Georgia didn't take the foot off the gas. They weren't running trick plays or anything, but it was Vanderbilt got toe to toe with them. And when I watched Kirby and Derek go down and meet after the game, I kind of felt Kirby saying, "Derek, you made some good adjustments."
Yeah, I thought they did too. I thought that in short yardage situations, they got the 4th down stop and they got of course, the turnover. That was not short yardage, but that was one of the more impressive things they did all night, because Georgia was going to run the ball and Vanderbilt knew it most of the night. It didn't stop them anyway. And when you got an offensive line that's that big, to get stops in those situations, those are the ones that really matter. Now, look, we're talking about a 24-point game, so how much all this matters, I don't know. But, again, when you're playing a team at that level, you try to find things to be encouraged about. And I thought that situational defense was one of those things.
Well, you go back and you look at last year, and that's the offensive line that was deemed to be the best offensive line in the entire nation. And they've got 4 of those 5 back. So, there's nothing to be ashamed about lining up against those guys and not winning the battle. But, you play the game to win the game, not making excuses for the guys. But I did feel like the adjustments that were made, it looked in the first half like it could have gotten embarrassing. And that's one thing I will say. I was talking to somebody earlier today. I've never seen, since I've been doing the games, I've never seen this team quit on Derek. They keep fighting for him. And that speaks volumes for Derek.
I thought that too. There have been a lot of times where they played games where in the first quarter, early second quarter, you're thinking, man, this may be 55-7 or something like that. And Saturday was one of those. But they seem to have a pretty good resiliency of sometimes not only not letting that game get to that point, but making it interesting. And occasionally winning one or two of those.
Yeah, and I've been in that situation before. I mean, goodness knows there's more years than I can count. But I've been in that situation where you go out and you're charged with blocking somebody, and the first thought in your mind is, I can't block him. I mean, he's that good. So when you come across that, it's easy to quit. That's when you got to make sure you don't quit. You just keep trying, figure something out.
I was on George Plaster's show today and talking about the game.
I'm sorry. I'm
Yes.
sorry that you had to do that. I saw George at the Y today. So
It came out okay, but I was thinking, and I said this during the show, and when I had time to think about it later, I was like, well, I think I still believe it, but I don't know that I would say it as emphatically now. And here's what I said. I said that I think this is more of a fair fight. I thought that a running attack like Georgia, where they can just cram it down your throat and there's not much you can do about it. And I do believe their defensive line has improved. That just was not a night you were going to see it. But then I got to thinking, okay, yeah, Purdue is an easier matchup for them, but at the same time, boy, remember the Texas Bowl. Teams that can spread you out and throw the ball over the field and get the ball to guys in space, and that's what Purdue does. Now, I think the difference is mobility at quarterback. I don't think Purdue's guys that mobile, but it did give me some pause for thought. What do you think about that?
Well, here's what I think one of the keys to the game will be, and that is that Derek has seen Coach Braum 3 times. First time they got beat. Second time they won an improbable win with an overtime drive, or actually a last-minute drive, and then went into overtime. And the third time they beat him pretty soundly. And I think one of the keys to this game will be that I think Derek kind of understands Coach Brom's passing game. Doesn't mean it hasn't changed in the last few years, but once you get inside somebody's mind, you can kind of figure out what the twists and turns are.
That's a very good point. It's something I've thought about. And I think that game, when the score came in Friday night or whenever you saw it on Saturday morning and Purdue had been upset by Nevada, that was one of those that really shocked me because I remember Vanderbilt and Nevada playing a year ago, and that was never a team that really threatened Vanderbilt, and I thought Purdue would have an easy time. Well, it did not. Now, the difference is, looking at the box score, and this is how these upsets usually happen, Purdue turned it over 5 times. Nevada didn't turn it over at all. And yet Nevada still had to have, a 50-something yard field goal by a walk-on kicker on the last play to win. So before people get too excited and say, well, we saw Nevada last year and Vanderbilt trounced them and Purdue just got beat, there is that to consider. It was kind of a flukish game.
Well, it's a flukish game, but one thing to remember is Nevada's got another year under the belt with this coach. And usually that's good news. The other thing to remember is that Purdue, the last time they put their cleats on and stepped on in a game, got blown out by Auburn. And there's a little hangover there when that happens. Even if the seniors are gone, there's a little hangover. They got whipped by Auburn. I think it was 49-0 at the half or something like that.
Oh yeah, that was one of the most lopsided football games. It was almost like they had brought a high school team out instead of Purdue to play Auburn. It was bad.
Yeah, so it's kind of like what happened to Vanderbilt when they had Alabama 2 years ago, and Alabama came in here and just claimed their clock. It took about 4 games for Vanderbilt to get the keel righted.
Well, here was Purdue's season last year. Purdue loses the opener to Northwestern by 4, loses to Eastern Michigan by 1, loses to Missouri by a field goal, then goes and beats Boston College, which is ranked 23rd at the time, 30-13. So an 0-3 team with the bad loss in there beats a ranked team. It goes to Nebraska and wins 42-28. It goes to Illinois and wins 46-7. It then comes home and beats Ohio State 49-20. Then loses a close one at Michigan State. Beats Iowa, which was ranked, by 2. Then gets blown out by Minnesota 41-10. Nearly beats Wisconsin in 3 overtimes, losing that one 44-7. And then beats Indiana at year's end by a touchdown. Then the Auburn game. I mean, that team between this first game and last year is just absolutely all over the place.
Yeah, and I mean, that tells me you've got a team that's still learning this system. It's not that unlike the 1981 Vanderbilt team, and sorry to drag everybody so far into the past, but we were good, and we could score a lot of points. We just didn't quite have it all put together like we did. So we went 4-7, but we scared people to death. Because we were putting points on the board. So there's that learning curve. And, it's almost like the team that makes the playoffs for the first time. They're not going to go all the way. You're pretty sure they're not going to go all the way because they've never been there. But then when they've been there, you start getting over the hump.
You talked earlier about Derek Mason sort of being able to get inside Jeff Brom's head and brought up how those matchups have gone over the years. Maybe this is an unfair question to ask because, man, that game now has been, 3 years, and I can barely remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. So with that said, I think I did. I'm not sure. But but what do you remember? I mean, when you say that, is there something in your mind that, you remember when you're watching the game that maybe they picked up on? Or what was it that it sort of turned the tide for Derek Mason against Brom's teams?
I think I've said it on the podcast before. It was the first year they played them, and Derek was coaching the defensive backs. And remember, he got the players. They were running the plays in slow motion. He got the players in the right position, and he told one of the defensive backs, there you are. You're in the right position. Now become a football player. And that's the difference. You can get a kid to go through the motions and do it time and time again and be in the right position, but you've got to be in the right position where you can either move on this guy or that guy. And then after some reps, you can kind of start figuring out where's this ball going. And you start learning to read the quarterback's eyes and things like that. It's just snaps. It's getting some snaps in. It's like jerking this weekend. What a game the guy had. So you found out he's a gamer. Now you got to coach him up. You got to make sure he knows what can happen out there.
I'm thinking back to the Western game a few years ago, and I don't want to say that's the game that changed the trajectory of Derek's career at Vanderbilt. You did have some rough moments the next year in midseason after the Alabama game, but that was kind of I don't know if you call it a defining moment or what the word was, but I think that's a game that, like, if they don't win, I wonder how differently things turn out in the time since then for him. Because that was a big win. They won at Western. I believe Western was ranked at the time.
Yeah, I mean, but that's how delicate this whole thing is. It's what makes it so difficult. There are those points in time where everything changes, where everybody buys into the program, and then they move forward. Or in that same point in time, you cannot buy into it and move backwards. And that's the hardest thing. That's really why somebody like Nick Saban is a phenomenal coach and a phenomenal leader, is because he can walk those guys to that point, have them experience it, and walk through it. And that's what you've got to do with these players is you've got to get them to the point where we believe, and then all of a sudden the belief, it's almost, sorry to bring it up, but it's almost a religious experience. It's almost having faith that things are going to be right, that you know what's coming and you're not surprised. And that's where the coaches have to get the players to.
Let's go ahead and go to the mailbag. That is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Do you need an insurance agent who wants to know your unique needs and circumstances and will tailor an insurance plan to fit them? Josh is your guy. Call him 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton. He is my insurance agent. Give him a shot. Get a quote. You got nothing to lose. I think you'll be very pleased. Josh is a great guy and has done a terrific job of helping me out. Mr. Vandy says, do you think they should have put Deuce Wallace in earlier if they were going to let him play?
Really good question, and that's one of those. I tell my wife when we're going to drive across town which way you want to go. I don't care. I said, well, if you don't care, I'm going to pick a way, and we're going to go that way. But don't tell me we probably would have gone quicker the other way. They were so close coming out of preseason camp. There were two ways you could handle it. You could say, look, Riley, you're a quarterback. Or, Riley, if things don't go well, you need to look over your shoulder. And what they apparently did said, look, Riley, you're a quarterback. So it goes out in the first half. He goes 11 for 13, which sounds really good, but we weren't getting anything downfield. I think it was like 65 yards in the first half. So, I can second guess all day, and I just won't do it because you don't know. It looked to me, I looked down on the field with Deuce's last drive, it looked like there were substitutions on the field. So, I thought he did a good job with it. But, I really don't know. That's one of those that I can't second guess the coaches because I couldn't second guess them when I knew what I was talking about.
Here is where I think it's tough. Let's say that you think that he's ultimately the better guy, but you're in the middle of that game and he just doesn't have it that day, and you wanted to be your guy long term. But you think if you stick with him let's say in the middle of the Purdue game, it's not going well, you're not going to win, but let's say you think you got a chance if Deuce comes off the bench. That's the thing about coaching, I think, that's always hard to figure, and I see this with Tim Corbin a lot. He will leave guys in situations where you're like, well, that guy probably cost him the game, especially if it's a relief pitcher. But he wants to let the guys get the experience and get the lumps and learn from that, and also to know that, hey, I've got confidence in you. That is a really tricky situation, and that's what I think if I have a concern for them on Saturday, well, I mean, first of all, you're playing a good Purdue team, so that's a concern. But I'm just thinking through this, I'm like, that is a delicate balance to walk if you're a coach.
No, it's absolutely a delicate balance, and you go through 2 days. It's kind of like I talked about earlier. You got to find out after 2 days. You got to put them out on the field and find out who the players are. Who are my game people? Some of these guys are playing for the first times in their lives. So who's the gamer? And I've got to find that person. So I think that the way they played it on Saturday, this past Saturday, will be different from the way they play it this coming Saturday. In that, I would sit up in the press box and I'd look down during the pass plays and go, nobody's open. So who do you blame there? I can't blame Riley for that. I blame good coverage from Georgia. I blame great athletic ability from Georgia. I can't blame Riley for nobody being open downfield. And don't forget, with Coach Godowski, it's his first game as the offensive coordinator. You got to learn who's going to perform under what plays the best, and then you go with that later on.
Let me go to the next one. Ann Arbor says, how hard is it to fix the high snaps, and how big of an impact do those high snaps have on quarterback play?
The impact is huge. They fixed it, but it cost them a couple of series. If you're even remotely going to do a run pass option, if you're going to do the RPO, then you've got to be able to put the ball in the ball carrier's belly. And what was happening when that ball was being snapped high, and most of them were high, is that you're not even getting a chance to pretend that I'm giving it to the running back. So that takes all of it away. The linebackers don't react up because they don't have to, because you never even showed me the football. So then you're stuck with a rollout, a throw, or a rollout and carry it. So it's huge. And, they fixed it, but it cost a couple of series there when the game was arguably, offensively still in doubt.
Well, and I was thinking, too, one of the criticisms on our message board, and I thought at the time, I think this is valid because they used it last year to such success, was that they didn't do the jet sweeps and some of the things that they did to really spread defenses out and get some first downs. But, okay, you remember the one turnover they had. It was a high snap, and you had a missed exchange, I think, because of that between Neal and Keyshawn Vaughn. Well, a high snap, if there's any play that throws off, I would have to think it would be jet sweeps and such.
Well, I can't, with all due respect, I can't go with the jet sweep being much of an answer because if you watch those linebackers from Georgia close, if you watch those DBs come up when they knew it was a run, I don't see that as having worked very much. Could be wrong, but that wouldn't have been the first thing as an offensive coordinator. I would have gone, hey, you know what we can do right now? Let's do the jet sweep and watch him get caught 4 yards deep.
Yeah, that's a fair point because sideline to sideline, they're so fast. But I guess even if you want to show that to give a defense one more thing to think about, you could end up something worse than a loss.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. I don't think it was the answer. I felt like the answer, at least what I would have done down 14-0, is start really working Pinckney. And I know I sound like a broken record, but I think if you can work that tight end, that changes the whole dynamic of everything. It's almost, not quite, but almost as big as getting the running game going.
Well, and here's the other thing on the topic of quarterback switches and such. I think if they're still having issues with snaps and things like that, it may not be fair to switch quarterbacks if he's having issues. Then, look, to the degree to which Riley Neal struggled because of snaps, I don't know. I'm sure it didn't help. I don't know if it was 100% of it. I don't know if it was 5% of it. I don't know what it is. But for argument's sake, if you're still having that issue, you probably need a center change before you need a quarterback change.
Well, I'm not so sure there's a change as much as a concentration. It's almost like the referees every year, they get a point of emphasis. And I think the point of emphasis this week will be, look, I don't care if there's a man on you or not. You make sure that ball goes back to hit the belt of the quarterback. And, that stuff's fixable. You don't know what's going to happen. That's why I keep talking about the heat of the moment of being in combat. When you're out there, you don't know how people react. Sometimes they surprise you. Sometimes they disappoint you.
Yeah, and that strikes me as a nerves thing because I'm sure he's made plenty of snaps that he's made just perfectly in practice. And I think when you do that in games, to me that is a being overwhelmed by the moment as frequently as he did it.
Yeah, I mean, you got a 300-plus guy sitting on your nose, and you got to snap it back. You got to see where the ball's going. You got to make sure that you're quick enough to cut off the right gap. I mean, there's so much that goes on with those guys. Everybody thinks it's just line up and be brute force, but the nuances that linemen have to play with these days, it's not just line up and whip the guy in front of you. It's step out and zone block and figure out which one's yours and then take him out. And it's really, it's a far different game than when I played.
Well, speaking of linemen, it sounds like Lorenzo Neal, who I guess is their best, and I think Derek Mason even called him their best player today. I think Rondale Moore might have something to say about that. But regardless, a guy that they really respect, he's one of their big guys up front. You have to think that if he's not available, which he's not on the depth chart, that could change some things.
Yeah, he's always had the talent. You could always see when you go to practice, you could see they had expectations and hope because everything you could look at it and it was there. But there's always that certain thing that you can't put your finger on about, is this guy a gamer? And I'm sorry to keep going back to that, but it's I don't know what percentage Michael Jordan shot and from free throw line in the NBA. I'd say I'm guessing low 80s. But when the game was on the line, that was the guy I wanted on the free throw line because he knew it and he would take care of it.
Well, and one more thing, Purdue runs a 4-3, Georgia runs a 3-4. Is that, just generally speaking, is one scheme a better matchup for them than another at this point?
It's more of what do I have the most of? And, at this point, I'm guessing Purdue, and given where they are, it's probably true, got more big men than they got linebackers that can really run. So that's usually what that's a sign of, which is interesting to me to see Vanderbilt, play a four-man front because historically that's been one of our weakest points that you just can't sign a top-notch nose guard or a top-notch, defensive tackle.
Norman, we covered a lot of ground tonight. Is there anything that's worth discussing that we didn't get to?
Well, nothing comes to mind, but I'm looking forward to going up to West Lafayette, and I certainly have higher expectations for Vanderbilt, and I think Riley will play better, and if Deuce needs to come in, I think Deuce will come in and get the job done. I'm far from giving up on these guys. Like I said, they played one of the three best football teams in the country this past week, and there's no shame in that. And, just line up and forget last week and do it again, except don't forget the mistakes of last week.
Norman, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to talking with you again next week.
Yeah, easy for you to say.
Easy for me to say, indeed.
Thanks, Chris.
You don't miss a trick, do you? He's Norman Jordan, the color commentator for Vanderbilt football. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thank you for listening. We've got another episode with Seabass coming later in the week, so be sure to tune in for that.